The World Between Wars 1900 to 1950 Part 1. Introduction. At the beginning of the 20th century, the world had a population of 1.6 million people. Industrial capitalism had changed the way many people earned their livelihood, but only in the Western countries. Eric Hobsbawm, a historian, called the 20th century the age of extremes. Politically, the world saw shoots of democratic aspirations grow amidst the rise for the people. Literally, more than 100 nations walked to independence and freedom across the world. This was also an age of great experimentation as people strove to build socialist societies based on the principles of equality and fraternity, or alternatively a liberal democracy based on the political liberty and capitalist economy. But the same period saw the Great Depression causing massive unemployment and economic breakdown, and two world wars in which millions died and the lives of many more millions were dislocated. Hence, the 20th century was a period of great expectations, experiments, and dangerous developments. World Wars, ominous facts. At the beginning of the century, the world was divided into developed industrialized countries of the West and colonial countries of Asia and Africa. The industrialized countries were at loggerheads with each other. They were divided into rival blocs, each vying for world domination, which would give it control over the colonies and markets. The First World War broke out in 1914. It ended in the defeat of Germany and its allies in the victory of Britain and France in 1918. The conditions of peace that followed only created the seeds of another and more deadly war from 1939 to 1945. It ended in the defeat of Germany and its allies, but before it ended, it had ravaged all the warring countries. Death and destruction. The two world wars were different from other wars that the world had seen till then. World War I had claimed 10 million men in battle. The consequences of World War II were even more terrible. It resulted in about 22 to 25 million military casualties and the deaths of approximately 40 to 52 million civilians. The US attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan with atom bombs, which killed between 150,000 to 246,000 people immediately. The after effects of these bombings, like leukemia and cancer, lingered on for decades. Power blocks. The second fact about the world during this period is the division of the world into nation states and grouping of these nations of the world into power blocks and degeneration of these alliances into war camps. By the end of the 19th century, different nations of Europe entered into alliances with each other against other blocs. Two main blocs emerged, the center and the entity or allies. They were the manifestation of that process of scramble for power and control over territory. Similar blocs continue into the Second World War. The Axis powers led by Germany, and the Allies, led by the Britain, US, the USSR. Causes of the two world wars compared. The two world wars of the 20th century were also dissimilar, separated as they were by 21 years and changes in economic conditions, diplomatic alliances, military hardware, etc. However, the purpose of understanding the differences, comparing the two world wars of the 20th century will be a good method. Immediate provocation of World War I was the murder of 28th June 1914 of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria by a Siberian fanatic. Austria declared war on Siberia. As Siberia was with Allied powers, the Austrian attack on it led these powers to come to Siberia's defense. Then the Central Powers, allied to Austria, also joined the war, and this marked the beginning of the World War I. Similarly, the immediate provocation for World War II was the German tanks driving into Poland on September 1, 1939. Hitler thought the takeover of Poland will also be a small military operation. But Poland had a defense pact with Britain, which jumped on to the Polish side, and France joined them a day later. This marked the beginning of the World War II. Let us turn to the long-term causes of the world wars: aggressive nationalism, imperialism, secret alliances, and militarism were the main long-term factors which led to World War I. But some new long-term causes were also added to the origins of the World War II. One of these was dissatisfaction of Germany with the legacy of World War I. Aggressive nationalism. The ideology of nationalism was positive impulse, but this ideology could also be used to create pride in oneself and hatred against neighbors. Italian fascism from 1923 and National Socialism of Germany Nazis were the other forms of aggressive Nazism in destructive mode. Imperialism. As industrial capital developed in European countries like Britain, Germany, and US, they needed markets for their products and access of raw materials. The governments of these countries acted on behalf of their capitalists to increase their areas of influence and reduce the areas under their competitors. As new industrial powers merged, they wanted to redivide the colonies, but the old powers were not ready for this. This created much stress, often leading to wars. Secret alliances. After defeating France in 1870, Bismarck, the German Chancellor, decided to isolate it. To achieve this end, he entered into secret alliances with Austria in 1879 and with Italy in 1882. The France broke their isolation by striking a mutual alliances with Russia in 1891, and after resolving irritants with Britain in 1904, Russia, France, and Britain formed their triple entity. In 1907, instead of real peace, these alliances created an atmosphere of fear and armed peace in Europe. Militarism. Militarism is a belief that military might is the best way to ensure security and war is good way to solve problems. From 1880 to 1914, the military expenditure of the six big powers increased by over 300%. That is, from 132 million to 397 millions. Each of these countries built massive standing armies, competed with each other in increasing their armaments, but built a mindset among the people to support wars. A large industrial complex producing arms emerged, which constantly promoted the idea of using wars as a solution to diplomatic problems. The special context of the Second World War. The Treaty of Versailles. World War I ended with the Conference on Peace at Versailles in 1990. The five big victorious powers of the time, USA, UK, France, Italy and Japan, participated in this conference. But Socialist Russia and the vanquished powers, for example Germany, Austria and Turkey, were not invited to the conference. Hence, those deliberating the future of the world did not have the wise counsel or deeply felt wishes of these powers. To weaken Germany, the Treaty of Versailles imposed some territorial penalties and military cuts on it. The League of Nations. The Treaty of Versailles also set up the League of Nations to prevent wars in future. Russia or Germany was not invited to become member of the League. Hence, even at its peak in 1934, the League had 58 members only. It was hoped that it will help eliminate wars through collective security and settle disputes between countries through arbitration and negotiation. It also set up several international agencies for conducting welfare activities like health, labor welfare and also International Court of Justice for legal disputes between nations. It failed eventually to prevent Germany and Italy from violating international agreements and attacking other countries. German challenge to vengeful domination. After the defeat of Germany at the end of First World War in 1919, the victorious Allies wanted to punish Germany for starting the war and also cripple it so that it cannot arise again. For the Germans, the provisions enforced on them by the Treaty of Versailles were slavish. This created a reaction in Germany which led to rise of Hitler and his Nazi party. Germany re-industrialized itself furiously under the Nazis and developed a massive army and armament industry which could only be served by a war. The fear of socialism and the USSR. The disasters resulted of First World War caused great social upheavals all over Europe. All over Europe, peace movement gained great popularity. In Russia, a revolution took place in 1917, which resulted in the establishment of a communist state there. The Western capitalist countries like Britain were afraid of a similar revolution in other countries of Europe and initially encouraged Hitler and the Nazis to consolidate themselves to act as a buffer between Soviet socialism. However, in 1939, Germany and USSR entered into a non-aggression pact and Hitler turned against Britain and France alliances. This started the Second World War. Consequences of the World Wars. Enormous human cost. The first consequences of the wars was widespread deaths and injuries. Most of these who died were men, and almost all of them were under 40 years of age. The two wars also established a regime of lethal arms race, particularly of nuclear and chemical weapons. The world is still living constantly under the threat of total destruction of all life through even accidental use of such weapons. Democratic principles asserted. Two wars also brought home the dangers of having undemocratic governments and greatly strengthened the case for democratization of power. With the First World War, several empires also ended. Similarly, during the First World War, on the demand of their subjects, the colonialists accepted the principle that self-government is desirable in colonies. With the process of decolonization after World War II, the colonies arose to independence and several of new countries were born across Asia and Africa. Change in balance of power. The map of Eastern and Central Europe was redrawn on the basis of nationality, economic viability, and military security. When World War II came to an end, the map of the world changed yet again as ex-colonies rose to become independent nations. New international organizations. After World War I, the League of Nations was formed to resolve disputes peacefully, and the United Nations Organization (UNO) was formed after World War II. UN is a kind of world government based on four principles: preserve peace, uphold human rights, respect international law, and promote social progress. It works through organs like UNICEF, UNESCO, WHO, ILO, etc. Enfranchisement of women. After a long struggle for political right like right to vote, British women got these rights in 1918. With men away in the battlefields, more women had to work in factories, shops, offices, voluntary services, hospitals, and schools. Beginning with the confidence of being breadwinners, women began raising their voice for equality in all walks of life. Getting the right to vote was a big step in that direction.
మా వీడియో కనుక మీకు నచ్చినట్లయితే లైక్ చేయండి, షేర్ చేయండి. ఇలాంటి మరిన్ని వీడియోస్ కోసం మా ఛానల్ని సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేసుకోవడం మాత్రం మర్చిపోకండి. థ్యాంక్ యూ ఫర్ వాచింగ్.